It's been a while since I've had the chance to get the light lure rod out and have a go for perch on the Norfolk Broads, as real life has taken priority over the last few weeks. Anyway, with the break in the daily humdrum of life, I got the opportunity to dust off the fishing gear and head on over to Salhouse Broad. This is the 8-minute walk from the car park to the Broad. I haven't fished Salhouse Broad since the start of the summer during the heatwave when I was spinning for pike. The session didn't go well, and not just because I didn't catch anything. During my last fishing session on Salhouse Broad, the place was rammed with boats and tourists, and wasn't a nice place to be. Since the summer was over, and the kids were back at school, I assumed Salhouse Broad would be quiet. However, I was wrong. When I reached the Broad, I was confronted with boats, and whilst there were fewer than last time I was here, there were still loads about. Because of this, I decided to head as far along the bank as possible and try my luck there. To the right I have some trees, bushes, shrubs and other overhanging foliage, and to the left there is a large expanse of open water. Because of this, I'm going to use a two-pronged approach, which is drop-shotting a plastic worm to my right in the foliage and jigging a plastic worm along the bottom to my left in the open water. I've been advised by several other anglers in the online forums perch love the snags, so I have high hopes for this area of water, and if I'm going to catch, it is going to be from here. I'm determined to catch a perch, and I don't care if it weighs 2 pounds or 2 ounces. Therefore, I've decided to scale the drop shot tackle right back. Rather than using my normal 5-inch worm on a size 2 long shank hook, I will be using a 2-inch worm on a size 10 long shank worm hook. Instead of casting the lure a long way out, which appears to be not how to drop shot fish, I am going to cast it no further than 3 rod lengths out and get it as tight to the snags as I dare. I will then do a super slow, and I mean slow, retrieve, periodically stopping and twitching the rod tip as I go. I did manage to get a couple of knocks along the margin, and I even managed to hook a fish and get it to the surface before it rolled off and escaped. The fish had a silvery belly, however I can't say for sure whether it was a perch or not, and I guess I'll never know. Losing a fish is frustrating, especially when it would have been my first capture using the drop shot method, but I guess that's just the way it goes sometimes. I didn't get any more knocks or bangs after the lost fish, therefore feeling a little deflated I admitted defeat and decided to try my luck with jigging in the open water. For my jigging setup, I am using a 7.5 gram jig head with a size 4 Gamakatsu worm hook. I am using these hooks because they are strong and sharp. If I snag the bottom, these hooks won't straighten, and if I hook a pike rather than a perch, I know I will be able to land it with one of these hooks. This particular size hook is not suited to small perch, it is just too big, so the setup is for the larger perch. Because of this, I'm reverting back to my 5-inch artificial worm rather than using the smaller 2-inch ones. I appreciate the 7.5 gram weight isn't exactly micro or finesse, but then the hook and lure combo I'm using isn't micro or finesse either. The heavier weight will help me with the casting and enable me to get the lure out the distances I need to get to the open water. Despite several casts into the open water with the jig head and worm, I couldn't tempt a bite. I got a few knocks, but these ended up being the bed of the Broad rather than the fish. My heart stopped with every knock and kick, even though it was the jig head or the hook just snagging the bottom. The first swim didn't produce a fish, therefore it was time to up sticks and move to a different swim. This swim is not too far from the first, it's just that when I first turned up there was a boat here. The boat has now gone, so it's time to fish it. There is an overhanging tree to my immediate left, but the bulk of the swim is open water. There could be some perch under the overhanging tree, however I don't intend to drop a shot worm, at least not in the first instance. Before getting out the drop shot rig, my plan is to jig the worm under the tree. If I get a knock, I'll use the drop shot. If I don't get a knock, I won't bother. This swim is a jigging swim, and I think the best way to tackle it is to cast the lure in an arc shape from left to right and then back again, bouncing the worm off the bottom. The plan is to go as tight to the overhanging tree as I can and end up tight alongside the key heading. The fish I hooked, and subsequently lost, in the first swim was right at my feet, so it's worth getting as close to the key heading as I can. After several minutes, and casts, of not getting as much as a knock, it was time to call it a day with the second swim and try somewhere else. This is a tight swim that I have always looked at in the past but never actually fished, because of the close proximity of the trees and the risk of losing lures. In previous sessions I have used longer 11-foot rods and larger lures costing at least a tenner a piece. The Witchwood agitator dropshot rod I am using today is only 8'3" in length, and the lures I use cost pennies a piece. The point I guess I'm trying to make is that casting room is no longer a problem, and if I do mess it up, the cost of the gear I stand to lose isn't that much. The overhanging branches to both my left and right provide a bit of cover for the perch to hide in, and are definitely worth fishing to. There is also an expanse of open water to cast a worm on a jig head and bounce it along the bottom. I've decided to stick to the rigs and lures I described when I was in the first swim, as I see no real reason to change. Well, at least not yet. One of the biggest dilemmas I have when lure fishing is knowing when to call time on a swim and move on. I see some anglers make 3 or 4 casts and then move on, and I see some anglers make cast after cast after cast, refusing to try somewhere else until they hook a fish. I tend to fall into the latter category, and I probably do spend more time in non-producing swims than perhaps I should. It's a mindset, and one I definitely need to change if I'm ever going to become, in inverted commas, good at this. As I'm sure you've already guessed, the third swim didn't produce any perch either, and I can't even tell the story of the one that got away, like I can with the first swim. After spending, probably a bit more time than I should have, it was time to move on. This swim is totally consumed by trees, and I have to admit that I would never normally fish a swim like this. Indeed, the only reason I'm fishing it on this session is because I have been advised by many anglers, online, perch love the snags, and you won't find a much more snaggy swim than this. This is one tight swim, and requires the lightest of underarm flicks to get the lure in the water. Overcasting will result in hookup and lost gear for sure, so I need to be uber careful to make sure I don't go in too gun-ho. I have no idea what the depth of water is here, or what the bottom is like under this canopy, because it is too dark to see. This swim is a step into the unknown, and a real punt, but it can't hurt to give it a quick go. I'm definitely not going to get the jig out in this swim, and will instead lower the drop shot rig in position and then move the rod tip to get the worm dancing and, hopefully, get me my first perch for the session. Just like all the other swims so far this session, I have failed to catch, and it's time to try it elsewhere on the Broad. The last swim didn't produce a fish, but then I guess I was hoping for a little too much. I never did identify the depth of the water, it was too dark, but I did discover the bottom is full of dead, stinking leaves and twigs. The smell of the lure when I got it out of the water was rank, so I'm not really surprised I didn't catch anything. Once again, it was time to move further up the Broad. Even though there is a lot of water in front of me to fish, the low trees above my head is making overhead casting very difficult, even with my relatively short 8'3" light lure rod. The only way to make sure I don't snag a tree on the cast is to get the lure into the water using an underarm flick. This swim is shallow and you have to cast a fair distance to get to the deeper water, and no matter how hard I try, I can't get there with an underarm cast. The depth of water is the same all round me, so there aren't even any deeper channels or gullies I can target. This swim looks promising and like it should hold a perch or two, but everything, i.e. overhanging trees, shallow water and flat, contourless bottom, is stacked against me. After a few short casts it became crystal clear I was wasting my time with this swim, so I made the decision to pack up, move on and find another swim to have a go at. This swim is the last chance saloon of this session and is not actually on the Broad. This swim is on the river linking Salhouse Broad to the Broad's network, and it is the only place you can get to the water's edge on this stretch. That is, it is the only swim between the Broad and the car park. This stretch of water is quite wide and looks very fishy. There is a deep channel running down the middle and there is plenty of bankside features to fish to, if I can cast the lure the required distance, that is. This afternoon has flown by and I am now fighting the daylight and don't have too much time left. Rather than drop shotting and jigging, I intend to get the jig out and explore as much water as I possibly can. If I get a knock or two, I'll switch over to the drop shot rig and hope the fishy spots isn't too far out. If I don't get a knock, I'll simply carry on jigging and exploring the water until I do. There are a few snags and bankside features close by, which, if I had more time, I would tie on the drop shot rig and spend a bit more time exploring them. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to do this, so I'll have to have a go at doing a bit of stationary jigging close in. I only managed a few casts before I had to call it a day, pack up the rod and head home. As you probably already guessed, I once again failed to hook into a fish. I didn't even get a hint of interest, which did surprise me somewhat. This stretch of water looks very fishy, but for this session at least, it wasn't. It's never good returning home from a fishing session having blanked, but that's just how it goes sometimes. This hasn't dampened my spirit though, and I'll be back at some point in the very near future to give it another go.